Hi, I'm Johnny from UltimatePaperMache.com, and I finally finished the pattern for a paper mache T-Rex mask. I based it on the skull of Sue, the T-Rex. So I tried to come really close, and that's probably why it took me so long to get this done, is because I did a clay sculpture to start with. That's how I make my patterns. And I kept remembering all the people who have complained about the so-called velociraptors in the Jurassic Park movies. And so I figured there's a whole lot of people in the world who know a whole lot more about dinosaurs than I do. So I looked at, gosh, so many different videos about dinosaurs, and I looked at the paintings and sculptures of dinosaurs that have been made by other people. And when it all comes down to the fact that nobody really knows what they look like, you know, other than their skulls. So you can get away with a lot. The one thing that I did find out recently, and I can't even remember which video, they think that the skin colors might have been black and brown. And I thought that, wow, that's going to be great, because if I can make the skin really dark, those teeth are really going to show up nice, and so is the eyeball. So that would be really cool. But a lot of people make them green. Any color you want to make yours is fine, because nobody knows what they look like. So your guess is just as good as anybody else's. I'll show you right here what the pattern looks like before you put any paper mache on it and before you paint it. And the pattern comes with all the instructions for how to do all the taping. And the video that I made before this one actually shows you how to do a couple of tricky things. There's a couple of really small pieces right here at the corner of his mouth. They're not hard to put together, but kind of figuring out which way they go might be a little tricky. So I did show you how to do that in the previous video. There's also some aluminum foil on the inside of his lips, just to make that really strong right there, and to give you something to glue the teeth to. And I showed you how to put the hole for the cord. You're definitely going to need the cord, because this is way oversized. It doesn't look like a T-Rex if it's the same size as a human head. So I made them really big, and the only way to get it to balance on your head is to put a cord on there. And I'll show you actually how I did that here in this video. But in the last video I showed you how to put the hole on. It's really pretty obvious. Now in this video, I'm going to show you how I put the paper mache on there, how I sculpted the teeth, and how I painted it. So let's go ahead and get started. Before I start putting my paper mache on here, I wanted to make just a couple of details. She does have some bumps on her head that were really difficult to do with just plain cardboard. It comes really, really close, but it's just not quite there. So the one that I want to do, the first, is just kind of a rounded bump right here on that part of her, I don't know what her eyebrow bone, we're going to call it. And I'm just using some aluminum foil here just to round it off a little bit. I need to flatten it out just a little bit so it'll go on there properly. And if I put it right there, it just kind of sticks out, and I don't know what it's for. I think it's just a bony thing. I'm kind of having to stretch here because the cord on the hot glue gun isn't quite long enough. There, I know that looks silly, but Sue seems to have one, so that's what I'm going to do. Now, there's also a ridge that goes down here all the way, well, about to here, just right down there. And it's very close to the ridge that we already have on the cardboard. I'm obviously doing, you know, extra things that you don't have to, just because I think it'd be fun. So I'm going to go all the way from that crazy bump, like that. You need to kind of support it from the back to get it on there really nice. You want to make this part kind of match with that. Just kind of do some sculpting on the fly is what I'm doing, really. That's how I wanted it to look. Now it's going to look very different after we get the paper mache on there. Now when you're doing the nostrils, you are going to be using the nostrils to see out of, a little bit at least. So don't cover up the actual hole. But you might want to do just a little bit of sculpting, you know, just to give it a little bit more shape right there. So that's all I'm going to do to add shape to this, because everything else is really close. I'm just going to do the other side, of course, and then I'm going to start adding some paper mache. I made myself a whole bowl of paper. This is brown paper, but it's actually the same weight as newspaper. It comes in Amazon boxes. And I'm going to use this as the undercolor and just put some black on top of it. Hopefully you'll be able to see the brown through it. This is actually Titebond wood glue with a little bit of water in it. It doesn't take much, just a tiny bit of water to make it a little bit more fluid. And we can use pretty big pieces for this. And I'll just go ahead and do this. This is really obvious. Just put one piece on there. Press it down as well as you can. I might need to get my hand on the inside pretty soon, just to add some support, but so far I haven't had to. Just go ahead and cover it up. And I'm not going to cover the teeth, but I'll put the paper mache right up to them, because the teeth I'm going to sculpt. I'm getting some really interesting textures. I don't know if you can see it now, because maybe you'll be able to see it later when the glue is dry. But because of the tinfoil on there, it's just kind of getting lumpy, and you know, like right in here. And normally we would want it to be smooth, but in this case, because that bone really is all kind of lumpy and weird on a real T-Rex, I'm leaving it. I'm thinking that's really kind of fun. Hopefully it'll still show up after the glue's dry. I really wanted some wrinkles right under his or her eyes. So I put one piece down already. And now I'm going to see if I can get this to wrinkle up properly. I know we could use paper towels to do this, but they're not brown, and I really wanted the brown. I think it's working. So now the paper mache is dry. It doesn't take very long for the wood glue to get dry, and it's really nice and strong. So now we have to decide what we're going to do about the teeth. We can leave the pointy ones just like this, actually with a little bit of wood glue on there. Just now that I'm looking at it, it makes them look kind of old because the wood glue is a little bit brownish. It's actually kind of cool. We could leave it just like that and not even paint them. That would be actually really nice and pretty scary. If you used the realistic set, that would work really well too, because they would be the actual shapes of the T-Rex teeth, and they would look nice and kind of worn out and old. I think that would actually look really well, and just don't paint them at all. Now the other option is to sculpt the teeth. I'm going to use the pointy ones as a base for sculpted teeth. There's two options here. The first option is just to use some aluminum foil. Just kind of crumple it up. You don't need very much. It's just really tiny pieces. Now it's kind of rounded, and they don't actually have points on the end. You can see the actual shapes with the other pattern piece. And then just hot glue them right on the tooth like that, and then cover them with some paper mache. I would do that after you get the first layer on, and then put the paper mache over the teeth. And you could use white paper for the paper instead of the brown paper. Add it with the wood glue, and they would have that coloration, but they would be much more realistic because they're rounded. Now the other thing that I'm going to do, and only because I happen to have some here in the house, is I'm going to use Magic Sculpt. I bought this for another project. These bins are almost half full, and I just don't know how long they're going to last without getting hard in the bin. So I want to go ahead and use them. If you're going to use epoxy clay of any kind, you always want to use gloves with it. I know that you can see a whole lot of YouTube videos where people are not using gloves because the label says it's non-toxic. But what they don't mention is that you can develop an allergy to epoxy if you use this stuff without gloves. I've got a cup of water handy so that I can get my fingers wet if I need to. And I printed out the realistic ones just so that you could see that there is a separate pattern piece. But I'm going to use those as my, to kind of remind me of how those teeth actually look, the real ones. I'm just using the, you know, the cardboard one kind of as a skeleton sort of thing. It's just going under it. I'm not going to wrap the Magic Sculpt around the back. I don't think there'd be any point in it. I think I read somewhere that these teeth are actually about 9 inches long on a real T-Rex. I learned so much about T-Rex when I was working on this pattern. That's one of the best things about drawing and painting and sculpting animals, is that you have to do research in order to see what they look like, or they won't be realistic, you know. And and you learn so much when you're doing that. I think it's amazing what they've been learning about these creatures, and it changes every year. Like now they're thinking maybe dinosaurs had lips. I don't know why they didn't think they did before, but evidently they didn't. His teeth are on there now. They're not completely cured. It's only had a couple of hours, but they're hard enough so that I won't damage them when I paint, and I'm really anxious to find out what he looks like after the black gets added. I mixed up some black acrylic paint with burnt umber and ultramarine blue. And then I added quite a lot of the glazing liquid. That's to make it somewhat transparent and to keep it from drying too fast. I did use a pencil and draw around the eye just to remind me that that part's going to be white eventually, so I don't want any black on it. And I've got out a paper towel because I want to I kind of practiced on a piece of cardboard to see if this would work. I want the brown paper to show through. It seems to be really important to me, so that's what I'm going to do. And I want to be able to kind of dab at the paint to make sure there aren't any brush marks. They have some T-Rex fossils that show the skin pores and where they may have been, you know, when they're babies, they may have had feathers. So be sure and go online and look for those. Now, you're probably not going to want to paint your T-Rex like I am, but if you do, don't wear your favorite shirt because I've been kind of waving it around in the air and he keeps hitting me with this wet paint. So you can see my hands totally covered in it. So wear an old shirt. After I got all the black on there, I started to just use some really fine sandpaper to get rid of the little spots of black that I had gotten on the teeth. The teeth are not anywhere close to cured yet. They've only been on there a couple of hours. So they're still fairly soft. So I had to be really careful. And I also was trying to be really careful not to scratch up the, you know, the black parts. But then I did, and right there. And I was thinking, hey, I like it. Oops, there's another black spot. So I went back over some of it here, just right along the ridges. And there, just to kind of bring out the shapes. Spent a long time getting those shapes on there, so I wanted them to really show up, and I kind of like that. Maybe just a little bit more on that little bump on top of his head. I like it. Very, very, very simple, this painting job. I'm sure that you'll go to a lot more trouble than I am. I'm not a painter. Never have claimed to know what I'm doing when I paint. But sometimes it's just fun to play around and you know, do things that might work, and if they don't, then you can always just do it over. It's no big deal. I still haven't quite figured out. had hoped that this area here would be a little brighter. I don't know why I thought that would be true, but for some reason I did. I rubbed off almost all of the black that I could get off, but it soaked in, and so it isn't quite the way I wanted it to be. My daughter thinks that yellow eyes would stand out the best, and I found some here on Pixabay. It's a great horned owl. I'll use these eyes as my model. I scrounged around in my stash of paint and found this sunny yellow folk art, and I added some white to it. And so that's my first layer. And I'm just gonna put kind of a white spot and mix it in. This is where the pupil's gonna go, and I want it to be lighter right there. When I was looking for my yellow paint, I found these metallic wax things that I've had for at least 30 years, and this walnut color, I thought, wow, that's really close to the brown paper. I just decided to check and see what would happen if I rubbed a little bit of it just around, you know, right around his eyes, just to kind of bring out that area a little bit. I don't know what you think. This is going to be the hard part. I cut some black paper, just tissue paper. I cannot ever paint two pupils the same size. I mean, it just is not, it's just not possible. I don't know, I can't do it. I usually use a clear medium to stick them on, and I don't have any. They're just totally all gone. So I'm going to use this ultra matte varnish. It dries pretty fast. That's why I like the medium, because it dries really super slow. You can put it on there. It's working. I don't know if it's gonna move. It did. So I think that worked pretty good. It doesn't move around as easily as it does on the clear medium. I can't even remember what type of medium I used, but I know that it worked better. These didn't move as easily. You know, you can usually, if you're using the medium, you can just kind of slide the pupils around to get them exactly in the right place. But it worked out okay. Now, as soon as the paint was dry, I took it downstairs to the basement, and I gave him a coat of this Rust-Oleum matte clear enamel. It just looks really nice. It's not terribly shiny, but a little bit, so I thought it had a kind of a leathery look. I did use some fingernail polish on his eyes to just make them really stand out. And then the last thing to do was to add the cords. I showed you in the previous video how I put the holes in there. I went and found some cores. Basically, I just cut them off an old sweatshirt. I made sure that it would fit through the holes in the mask, and then I also put the other end through a washer that I found in my junk drawer and made a knot. We got 2 layers of cardboard on the mask itself, and then the washer. It should reinforce it really well, so I don't think we're going to have any problem at all with that pulling out. And then we can tie it on under a chin, nice and tight. I'll do that here. Now, if you would like to make a T-Rex mask using my pattern, you can find it now at ultimatepapermache.com/T-Rex mask. That's easy enough. I'll put a link to it right down below. And I would love to see how yours comes out if you do make one. So be sure to come back to my website and post photos on the Daily Sculptors page. I just can't wait to see how different every single one of these is going to be. I'm just really excited about that. Go make something, whether it's a dinosaur or anything else, and then come back and visit me, ultimatepapermache.com. I see you there.